All right. Well, thanks, Lacey. And hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'm traveling out of state, but through the wonders of technology that Lacey has visited upon us, we're able to do this remotely. I just wanted to say a few words of introduction. You know, NMW is committed to fostering sustainable, growing communities on the edge of the Boundary Waters wilderness. And I had our task force dedicated to that purpose. And of course, Tuesday Group's an important part of these efforts. But we've been particularly inspired by the work of John and his colleagues at the U of M Extension Center for Community Vitality. And so we're so delighted to have them here today. Their research has shown evidence of a rural brain gain rather than the brain drain we hear so much about. What we find through their research is that people move to recreational, amenity-rich towns like ours for reasons that have nothing to do with a job, including, most importantly, perhaps quality of life. And in fact, more often than not, people find that they move without a job and actually create one or bring one with them. So we believe in that connection that new residents are a crucial part of an economic and social diversity that are foundational to strong and growing communities. And so it's with that in mind that we are excited to have John and his team with us today, talking about ways to stimulate these positive trends supporting new resident recruitment. So please join me in giving John and his team a warm welcome, and thanks, John.
So yeah, again, my name is John Bennet. I'm with the Extension Center for Community Vitality, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the work that we've been up to over the last decade and a half related to migration, and particularly rural migration, and sort of the impact that it's had on Minnesota. And also we're going to talk about some of the new trends that are happening out there, and sort of how it relates to community and economic development. And so for some of you, it's, you know, it may be like this may be sort of some new approaches to economic development that you haven't thought of before, but we're going to chat with you a little bit about that here today. So just in general, feel free to just shout questions out loud, raise your hand if you want. I don't really care. If we make it through all the slides, that's great. If we don't, because we end up getting in a good conversation, that's fine too. Whatever happens is going to happen. Also, I've got a couple of, I have a few people that I've invited here today. First of all, Shelley and Sully were two folks that I invited to be my guests here today. They're newer residents to the Iron Range, and I was meeting with them a few weeks ago in Evelyn, and I was like, boy, wouldn't it be great if the people in the area could hear a bit from them. I wonder if I'm too close to this one. Do you think that might be the case?
I think we just have two mics, and one of them is better than the other.
Okay, well, maybe we can work on that. But Rochelle and Sully are here, and they're gonna just share for a few minutes about their experience a little bit later on. I should have told you that when you guys walked in. Closer towards the end here, but we'll get to it. Also, Fawn Sampson is here, and Fawn's gonna do a brief introduction here in a few minutes. And my boss, actually, it's not my boss, it's my boss's boss, decided that he wanted to come up today. So I was excited to invite him up to Ely because, hey, it's Ely, and who doesn't want to go to Ely? So Dr. Steve Janetta is here, and he's been with our center for about a year now, and we were lucky to steal him from the University of Missouri. So anyway, welcome to Fawn and Steve as well. So okay. This was working earlier.
Now does it work?
Yep. Well, first of all, I'm just curious, how familiar are people with the Extension Center for Community Vitality? Has anyone ever heard of us before? No? No, no one? No one, somebody has. Well, Becky has, yeah, and Lacey has. Okay, well, hey, we've got a new group here. So our center, first of all, we're part of the University of Minnesota is a land grant institution, and Extension fulfills a big part of that role. And Extension has a handful of centers. We have a center that does work in food and agriculture, a center that does work in youth development, family development, and we're with the Center for Community Vitality. And we do work in communities around the state doing a number of different things, but we sort of have a few different focus areas. I'm a community economics educator. Is this distracting the microphone, or is it with the? It's okay. It's okay. I'm a community economics educator within our center, but we also have people that are educators in leadership and civic engagement. My colleague Fawn over here, and we're also home to the university's tourism center. So amongst our three groups here, we encompass the Center for Community Vitality, and our job overall is we do work in communities around the state, and we want to help inform local decisions and improve processes that they use. Let's try this one. Is this one any better? Okay. Well, we'll see how this goes here. This one is sounding a little better so far. And I wanted Fawn to just take a moment. Fawn is, she's been with us for a couple of years now, and she's been doing some fascinating work around the state. And I wanted to just make sure she had an opportunity to tell you a bit about it.
Right off the bat.
Right off the bat, sorry, Fawn.
I'm trying to listen to you for 20 minutes.
Nobody wants to.
Hello, my name is Fawn Sampson. I live in Grand Rapids. I was born and raised on the Leech Lake Reservation. So my main title is American Indian Leadership and Civic Engagement Liaison. So the main focus of my work has been working in and around tribal nations throughout the whole state. So I work statewide. Past couple of years, my work has been mostly focused around economic development. That will change coming in the new year. So the Minnesota Indigenous Leadership Network was born out of this work that we have been doing. I had a couple other colleagues start who have recently moved on to other positions closer to their homes, one retired. So that leads me to kind of design what this work is going to look like. So the reason why I bring up this network is because one of my main goals of this work is to build trusting relationships and to rebuild those relationships, especially around border towns near and around tribal nations. So we have Voice Fort just right down the road. I do have relatives that live there. So that'll be some of my work in the future, and I would be happy to have further conversations, maybe be invited back for another talk to talk about what that would look like. So really engaging organizations and groups of people to think about how they include in that Indigenous voice and including those neighboring tribal communities. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fawn. And by the way, this is not my first Tuesday group presentation. I have been here before, but it's probably been about 5 or 6 years. The last time I was here, I was talking about rewriting the rural narrative, and I don't know if any of you folks were in the crowd for that one, but you guys gave me this great coffee mug that my wife's friend ended up hawking from my house, and I've been missing it for about 3 years now. So I was a little upset about that.
That's why you're back.
It's why I'm back. Yeah, I needed that. I needed that coffee mug. But I just wanted to. You guys are a pretty outspoken group here. I just wanted to, before we dig in, I wanted to ask you, what does economic development mean to you? When you think about economic development, what does that mean, or what kind of activities does that entail? I'm just curious, and there's no right or wrong answers here, by the way, because even people that do economic development, we don't even always know what we're doing either. So, but I'm just curious. Anyone want to share? Lacey.
I think it would be having growth towards more people experiencing a strong economy, so that the economy is good for more people.
Okay, thank you.
Can you repeat?
Do you want to?
Sure.
Sure.
I just had shared that I think economic development is progress towards having a strong economy for more people, so that more people experience a healthy economy.
I like that definition. Yes.
Discovering potentials or business opportunities or creative businesses.
Business opportunities, potential, great. Yes. Yes.
City building.
City building.
City building city.
Okay.
As well as a tax incentive, for supporting public services.
Okay. So yeah. So public services and incentives for all different types of. Yeah, Sully, go ahead.
Creating a sustainable economy that can withstand shocks.
Great.
Can you repeat that, please?
Do you want to go ahead? Just speak up a little bit.
Creating a sustainable economy that can withstand shocks and whatnot. Things are dynamic and changing.
Thank you. Yes.
Related to that is a diverse economy, which is part of the sustainability.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit? What do you?
Having a diversity of economic sources within a community so that it doesn't depend on a single or a small number, and so that different economic strengths develop and then wither over time, but there can be a balance that is remaining.
Okay. Okay. Great. Anyone have a final definition that they want to throw out there? Yes, Becky.
I think it's an economic environment that appreciates and supports entrepreneurship and creativity.
Okay. Okay. Great. About a decade ago, we started having conversations, primarily, not necessarily with community members, but people in communities who maybe work for an economic development authority or a chamber of commerce, and we started realizing that, there aren't very many people who can agree. Oh, Lacey told me not to go ahead of the chairs here, and I wander, so just tell me to push me back. But what we found out is that nobody really has, there's no one definition of economic development, and there's no right definition of economic development, and it's sort of a field that's been evolving over time. It's sort of linked to, in our world, we sort of think of this as community and economic development. And, but I wanted to show you, this might be pretty tough to see for some of you in the back here. But one of our really smart friends at the University of Wisconsin Extension named Steve Deller, a long time ago, about 20, 25 years ago, he started writing about these different waves of economic development. And he started to try to put them in these phases that you could identify by year or time period as well. And so this whole field started out with industrial recruitment. Does this thing have a laser pointer on it? This one up here.
One underneath this one right here.
Oh, this one. I should have done all this prep work beforehand. Sorry. Industrial recruitment. So the idea is mostly on creating jobs, and or the goal is to recruit a new business. And this, even today, a lot of people, when you ask them about economic development, what they think that is bringing new jobs to town. Hey, let's put our resources together and think about the available lots that we have, and what do we need to do to get a light manufacturing firm to move to town. And that was sort of the name of the game for a long time, and until we started to figure out that, it doesn't really work that well. And businesses don't just pick up and move that easily, even if you are offering large incentives to move. Incentives can be important, but some people call this industrial recruitment as smokestack chasing as well. So sort of going after the big employers. Then we sort of moved into this grow your own phase. So I do a lot of work with something called business retention and expansion. And this was when the field started to move more towards, hey, how do we keep the businesses that we already have in our communities? And how do we grow the ones that we have? We do know that it's a much better bang for your buck if you invest in businesses that you already have rather than the ones that you don't have, rather than recruiting businesses to be here. So it makes a lot of sense to improve communication amongst the business community and the community at large to kind of help identify issues that are out there. So the overall goal with growing your own is to increase the number of jobs and the current number of small businesses. Then we moved on to cooperation and partnership. And so this sort of started to pick up, well, you know, I would guess about 20 years ago, a whole lot of discussion about regionalism and not necessarily competing with your neighbors, but the focus is more on business development and growth and identifying increasing jobs by targeting investment strategically, maybe as a region. And now we're just sort of starting to get into this resident recruitment phase. And there are a lot of places around Minnesota that are doing some things that are out there. And we're trying now, and that's going to be a big part of what this talk is about here today. But it's more of a people-based approach to doing economic development. So when we're having these conversations, we're not having a conversation that's just about what can we do to support the business community or grow our existing large employers. It's more now that we're starting to realize that businesses are starting to follow where the workforce is going, and the workforce is generally we're starting to move around, and we're realizing that many communities, it's a really smart idea to have some kind of a program or at least a process in place to start communicating with and working with, talking to new residents to start to think about how can we encourage new residents to come here, because we want residents of all ages and backgrounds to live in our community for the future health of our community. So some of this I'm just gonna skip over pretty quickly here. But with industrial recruitment, an example is Terrebonne, Minnesota. They do a lot of work with industrial recruitment. They have for a long time. They do a lot of manufacturing there, and a big part of their economic development approach as a community is to work with foreign direct investments. And it works well for them because they're located in the right location and they have the right workforce that's already there. So they've been pretty successful at it. But in my opinion, it's an example of a current community that's doing really good work in this area. For growing your own, I do a lot of work, as I mentioned, with business retention and expansion. And we help communities, and in extension, we sort of help communities examine their business sector and take a look at what their business climate's like, what is like, what makes businesses tick, what are their, what's holding them back, what are some of the barriers, and kind of coming up with community-wide solutions to make improvements. Another example of something we're doing in this area is business succession. We know that most businesses that are out there do not successfully sell, and one of the reasons that they don't successfully sell is because they don't have a business plan in the first place. And if you don't have all your ducks in a row, there's a good chance that when the time comes for you to put your business up for sale, it's not going to happen. And that's not necessarily that big of a deal if you're in the Twin Cities suburbs, but in rural Minnesota, losing a business is a very big deal, particularly because these businesses in many of our towns serve as more almost like an anchor to the community, and they're places where people gather. So they have more purpose than just doing that. So business succession is something that we've been doing in that area. And then cooperation and partnerships. An example of that is the Iron Range Economic Alliance. Is anyone in here aware of the Iron Range Economic Alliance? Okay, great. We have one. That's not enough. But the Iron Range Economic Alliance is a collection of cities and townships from Northeast Minnesota, not just from the Iron Range. That just happens to be what the name is. But we get together quarterly and we have a discussion about who's doing what and what's working well. And it's completely different than it was 15 years ago. We now know that it doesn't make sense for Ely and Chisholm to be competing with each other for businesses. And so we've made some progress in the northeast part of the state here, kind of coming together in this area. So these are all economic development activities, and none of them are the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. Part of our job at our center is to sort of not just to try and help communities do things, but also help them kind of do the research and do some evaluation measures to find out if what the community is working on is actually working. Because if it's not, and we can kind of prove that through the data or the feedback, we can change what we're doing. And so that's a big part of my job and what what we're doing. So resident recruitment it's especially in the last couple of years with the pandemic, it has been huge. And we've been doing this work for a long time. I'm not trying to pat ourselves on the back here, but we were doing this work a long time ago before it was cool. So this is we're focusing on a lot. This is where you're focusing on quality of life factors or people attraction strategies, and thinking more about economic development more as, hey, if we want to attract a workforce to live here, we need to have a really attractive, not just attractive place to live, but an open and inclusive place to live. And if you want to do that, you really need to be able to kind of be willing to take sometimes might be uncomfortable examinations into what things currently look like and where you might need some improvement. So we do know through the state economist has told us, first of all, unemployment is higher here than it is in other parts of the state. But we also know that moving forward, the northeastern parts of Minnesota is going to have a greater workforce challenge than it is in other parts of the state. And that should frighten us a little bit. And so part of what we need to do to thrive economically as a region is to demonstrate, not just to people that live in Ely, but people that don't live in Ely. We need to demonstrate that this is a great place to live, and this is a place where we want all people to live. And that's kind of our goal, is to start thinking about investing in more placemaking activities. And this is just empty over here because this is sort of a new topic, and we don't know how to do all this stuff yet, but we're trying. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some of the things that we are trying right now around the state. Oh, an example of this is Hello Iron Range. Has anyone been to the Hello Iron Range website here? Anyone? Oh boy, that's not good news. I won't tell my friends who started this up. This was started by the Iron Range Tourism Bureau and Beth Pierce, as well as someone named Sean Verhusky, who up until last week was the workforce consultant with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. And it's a website. It's supposed to be sort of like a one-stop shop for people that want to visit or move to the Iron Range, and it has a bunch of information on there about housing and the workforce and some other good stuff. It's pretty common to have these around the state. So our center and what I want to do is what we're sort of moving towards is identifying important themes related to economic recovery and resistance. We're discovering opportunities to strengthen economic recovery. We want to do that. We want to learn ways to build community resilience, and somebody mentioned something like that a little bit earlier. I can't remember who it was, but yeah, when these shocks do happen, how do we overcome them? And of course, want to consider and plan whatever the relevant strategies are for your community. Some of the ideas that we may have may sound like a great idea to you, and some may not, and that's fine. What we're here to help you do is to sort of identify what's your best path forward and what makes the most sense given the context of your geographic location, the people that live here, and of course, whatever we figure out when we sort of do this examination or kind of start to do the hard work. So some recent trends that we're noticing that have lasting impacts. The first one is the normalization of remote work, and that's a big one. And it's a big one in rural Minnesota and urban and suburban Minnesota. And I can tell you that the conversations that are happening in the metro area are for remote work are completely different than they are here. If you're a municipality, a suburb of the Twin Cities, and a lot of your bread and butter is office space location for larger employers, you know, there's a lot of places that are really nervous right now, and rightfully so, because office culture is changing, and that may not be their future. And so we're working with them too on their strategy, because their strategy is going to be vastly different. But in Ely, you guys have been dealing with remote work for a long time. I've known people who've done remote work up here. Also, the accelerated transition to online retail, that's a trend that's been happening for 20 years now, and the last year just sort of exacerbated that. The localization of supply chains, my gosh, if there's one thing that I could say that I think most people have learned about in the past year or so is what is a supply chain. A year ago, not a whole lot of people probably could have told you that, but now everyone and your brother could tell you how that supply chain impacts your daily life, or it can impact your daily life. So there's a lot of communities that are looking for ways to sort of get around that and sort of improvise or get creative with how to use more local products. We also know that there are disparities in the impact and recovery, and it's important to be mindful of what those might be. And we know there's a lot of increased interest in lower density and people moving out of major metropolitan centers. Is this something that's happening in Ely at all? Has anyone noticed that at least over the pandemic, have you had a renewed interest in people that may want to move here?
Yeah. Real estate boom.
A real estate boom, okay.
But we're out of houses, so we have a housing problem.
You have a housing problem. Oh my gosh, who doesn't have a housing problem? Right? That's right. So in the midst of every great crisis lies great opportunity. And so that's what we're sort of in the middle of some really tough times here, but we're getting through it, and we're going to get through it, and we're not going to be doing things the same as usual, or necessarily exactly the same as we did it before. So this resident recruitment is it's a newer economic development approach for technique, but it's not so new that nobody's doing it. This is the map of Minnesota of some of places around the state that are doing work in this area right now. So here's Hello Iron Range, but you've got Regen here. Warroad, Minnesota has a program called Warroad Live Life here. Thief River Falls, Otter Tail County. There's a whole bunch of places that are working on this right now. And so it's kind of one of those things where once we can figure out how to do this well, communities that can do it well are going to have an advantage. Some communities like Ely, which is rich in amenities and the natural environment, you're going to have an easier time than many other communities that aren't as lucky as you and don't have the resources that you have. But it's not new. There's people and communities are currently working on this kind of stuff around the states. So resilience, someone mentioned again earlier here, as being important for economic development. It's the ability to prepare for and adapt to changing conditions and withstand and recover rapidly from disruptions. So having a diversified economy and a diversified approach to economic development is important for that. And it includes the ability to withstand and recover from deliberate attacks, accidents, or naturally occurring threats or incidents. So because of that, we want to identify persistent economic challenges. We want to help communities create early warning tools. We want to build in flexibility, so processes that are more iterative, and we can sort of make changes as we go along and make improvements. But most importantly, we want to promote a positive vision. When I was here 6 years ago talking about the rural narrative and the importance of that, promoting a positive vision is really important. And so when people can see what's happening inside your community, it has a lasting impact it has an impact for people that don't live here. And so the work that you're doing is going to be visible to outsiders, or to either your visitors or people who have never been to Ely, whether you like it or not. So thinking about that narrative is really important, and you want to make sure that that narrative is a positive one. So in 2019, we did a rural movers survey around the state, where we had sent a survey to people who had moved from one zip code to another, basically people who had moved to a smaller town, and we asked them questions about why they did that. And this is sort of built on the earlier work that Ben Winchester had been doing, that we had been talking about, that sort of proved or demonstrated that, hey, rural America isn't necessarily dying, and people who in between 30, 40, 50-year-old age range actually were moving out states after at some point in time, generally from the metro area, for a variety of reasons. But we did a study a few years ago, and I'll just kind of show you a couple of highlights that we learned from that study. First of all, we found out that 31% moved primarily for a job. I don't know what you think about that number, but 10 years ago, if you were to ask people, why do people move? My guess is that most people would say people primarily moved to a new location because they were looking for gainful employment, and that physical location happened to be where that job is. And that's not the case anymore. Only 31% of people moved for their job. That means 69% moved for some other reason as their most important reason. 25% lived there previously, which means 75% of the people that we interviewed for thousands of surveys they came from someplace else. So these are not people that necessarily had family or friends in town, or they grew up here and went to high school here. These are people that are new, who are looking for something different than what they had. And most had a college degree or a bachelor's degree. They made money, and about half had kids, and 14% telecommute. And I'd be curious to see what that looked like 10 years ago, but obviously we don't have that. A lot of this information you can get on our website. I can give you our website here at the end, but because I know you guys can't see this in the back here, but this chart is just sort of showing here. It's this is just the top factors in determining destination, and this is just workforce. We did interview all households who had moved, but we did dig into places that were to just people that were in the workforce, and most people moved to take advantage of the slower pace of life and to live closer to relatives or live in a less congested community. Here's some other questions that we had asked that are pretty interesting. So we asked about those who are still likely to live in a community in 5 years, and asking a question about if the community is welcoming. If they strongly agreed with that, 86% said that they'd still be living there 5 years from now. But if the respondents said that they strongly agreed that the community is welcoming, only 44% predicted that they would still be living in that community in 5 years. So it has an impact, and this kind of work is important, and making sure that everyone's included. I'm not going to go over that one. So what are we doing? We're working on a whole bunch of things, but a few of them that we're doing right now is I wanted to tell you about was one called the Welcoming Communities Assessment. We're also doing some work in journey mapping or service mapping. Some of you may know a little bit about that if you come from or have ever worked in the retail sector before. And we've got another program that we've been doing for about a half dozen years called Making It Home. And so they're all sort of different approaches of thinking about how, or different, they're different tools that a community can use to do better work in this area and think about how we can be a better place for people that might live here. Anyone have any questions so far? I'm sort of flying through here. Anyone ready to fall asleep? Right, yes? No, yes?
Everything seems to be focused on towns. So how much of your work engages, is in our area, townships. Most of the landscape is outside of the very few towns that are here. I mean, unless you're going to count the Iron Range, but if you're talking about the northern part up here, north of the Iron Range, then what about, how do you, what's the importance of regional collective visioning, planning, et cetera?
Well, I mean, when we talk about, I mean, when I live in the city of Duluth, and when I talk about Duluth, I sort of feel like I'm talking about neighboring communities as well. But I don't know. Communities are sort of that's sort of our focus. But I do realize that there may be people that may not identify as living in a community if they, but we do work in townships. Anyone can have this conversation about, yeah, it doesn't have to be community. It could be any kind of community or jurisdictional level. And in some places that makes sense, particularly, if the Quad Cities, for example, on the range, it makes sense that they think about things collectively as opposed to separately. But any level of geography would be appropriate. Does that help? Yes.
What is the relationship between vacation and relocation? Like tourism leading into new resident recruitment?
Well, geez, I shouldn't have skipped over this slide that I skipped over. So I was trying to look at the clock here, and I wanted to make sure we had a good time for discussion.
Just representing the Zoom contingency.
Oh, the Zoom contingency. So yeah, this is not from our study. This is from a company called Longwoods International. They do tourism research, and basically what this chart is saying is that when you ask questions about their perception of a place, it's much greater if they've actually been to your town within the past year. So if you were to ask someone living in the Chicago area if they know about Ely and if Ely is a good place to live, if they've been there in the last year, they're much more likely to rank it much higher as much more positive, a good place to start a career. So basically what this is saying, I mean, this is benefit for tourism communities because they're saying, hey, if you can get people here and show them what they could have, you've already got a leg up. So, sorry, maybe I shouldn't have skipped over.
I didn't even see it.
Skipped over that one. Good. Somebody caught it. Somebody caught it on there. So from our experiences, if you aren't actively including people in your community, you're probably accidentally excluding them. And we need to get a whole lot better at this. And there's no place out there that is really good at this. We all need help with this. So a lot of the stuff we're working on now is sort of thinking about, well, how do we do this deep dive, kind of taking a look at ourselves. And what we have started to do in a few places in the past year or so is something called a Welcoming Communities Assessment. And we did this in the southern part of the state over the past year, and we got 3 different communities got together, and they all wanted to sort of do this at the same time, and we gathered them actually in the same room and had conversations about this. So we didn't make up the model. We sort of referred to the literature, and we looked at a model from Colorado State, I think it was Colorado State, and the Western State Center. And so we sort of started with their current assessment that they had, and we sort of put the Minnesota touch on it, I guess. And so we've been working on this in southern Minnesota, and it's been really a positive way to start to have meaningful conversations about what it means to be inclusive, and or what it means to feel excluded, and starting to kind of dive in and taking a look at what it looks like from a community perspective, even by sectors. So we're looking at, I won't get into too much of the weeds here, but we're looking at the dimensions of inclusion. So awareness about the overall importance of inclusion, engagement of diverse groups in community activities, resources to address inclusion, leadership energy to promote it. Sharing power was an important one in planning and decision making, and policies and practices. And then we also, we asked questions based on the community sectors. So when it was all said and done, it wasn't just going to be the overall community-wide response. We'd be able to take a look at how City Hall scored versus the nonprofit sector or the Chamber of Commerce or something. And it worked out well. We gathered people. We had it. This is done live, in person, face to face, sort of at circle roundtable meetings, and we have questions. I know you can't read this, but this question it's about awareness. Please tell me about the ways that the business community has shown awareness of the importance of inclusion. Looking forward, what more can the business community do to increase its awareness of inclusion? And then it's asking about rating for all these different sections. The business community is aware. They provide opportunities and learning about new cultures. And so we did this for for an afternoon, and have had a lot of good discussion about this, about many different topics. And we came out with a report, but the report sort of kind of showed you of like what these measures look like and how we're doing, and kind of shows you here how different places stack up against one another. The healthcare system versus local government, scored much higher, which probably isn't very surprising. Same thing with the school system here. And then we also looked at the difference by respondents, and whether they were white respondents or whether they were respondents of color. So it's just it's a different way of it's a tool to be able to kind of dive into this work and think about your community. Is that thing trying to follow me around here? Sorry. Think about your community, maybe from a way that you haven't done so before. All in the name of not just because it's the right thing to do, but all in the name of economic development, to make sure this is important work, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because this is how we're going to create economically vibrant towns, or just vibrant towns or places in general. And the example for the overall finding, the red here means that they did not do so well. So of course, local government in southern Minnesota did not do well. The local government never does well on any survey, and that's not necessarily their fault. It's just really hard work. So anyway, if you decide this might be something you want to do, don't be surprised if that happens. But having these ratings here, it sort of helps lead and guide the discussion about, okay, we know we have these issues, and we have an idea of where we're doing better or worse than other areas. So it kind of gives you a path forward. And then the community that went through a community engagement process where they looked at the results, they had discussions and they did, you know, local brainstorming, kind of coming up with ideas or insights of that were crucial, and they made decisions and made some decisions on actions moving forward. And so this is in southern Minnesota. We have communities down there that are currently working on becoming more aware of this issue. And so anyway, I'm going to move on here just for purposes of time. Another program that we've been working on here is journey mapping. And so this is really, it's less of a program than it is more of a process. Has anyone in here been in retail and maybe worked in service design before? Okay, all right. Anyway, this is a process where we want to help communities think about what it's like for a new person or a new family to move to a community that hasn't lived here before. So the service design experience, it's often community development work that's done through projects, but they don't always necessarily lead to meaningful changes, because once you start implementing these projects, we don't necessarily have anything set in place to make improvements to the process. And when that happens, generally things just stop happening. So this is something, it's sort of, the idea is to kind of take a look at the community through new eyes, but make decisions moving forward that are built on people's experience. And so this is where I invited Shelley and Sully to come here today to talk a little bit about a conversation that we had a few weeks ago in Evelyn. A colleague of mine in Extension, we went to work with Iron Range Tourism Bureau, and Beth is interested in doing some of this work in her area, and she invited a few folks to come out and learn a little bit about what it is and kind of do some thinking about whether this might be a good fit for them. But what we want to do is, if we can identify who our new residents are, we can have a conversation with them about their experience moving to town. And we can have a conversation with them about their experience before they moved to town, when they learned about this community, and what worked well, what did not work well, and what was it like 6 weeks after, and did people talk to you? Did your neighbors talk to you? What was it like the first time you maybe went into town to buy an appliance or something? So if we can gather this feedback and we can jot down the data, and if we do enough of these, we can sort of come up with themes that are able to that we might be able to move forward on. So at the end of the day, we come up with this map that sort of tells this story, and we can turn this map into a service blueprint that's used to make improvements. So as an example, what does it look like in a community? We did this in a town on the river in southeast Minnesota with about 1,700 people. They have an existing effort right now to retain and recruit residents, and their goal for doing this is, how can we improve upon our existing efforts to retain and recruit residents? And so the design team for this journey mapping process included the chamber, the city, and the school district. And so what it is, it's basically just taking time to teach people about what this process is that's going to be involved, gather their insights, and then actually design the intervention, which is basically reaching out to new residents, implementing the decisions that were made, and then maintaining that and making improvements. So I'm going to skip over some of these here. But as an example, one of the themes that came out in this particular community is that it was difficult for the people that came to town to find rental housing. And so the issue is that rentals were not necessarily advertised, and newcomers didn't know who to talk to. So the proposed remedy was to do a monthly survey of property owners and coordinate, have a coordinating entity as a main point of contact. And then we came up with a plan for that process, where of reaching out to property owners and finding a way to better connect them with the point source. So you can, I'm just kind of showing you how the dirty work is done here. Like, we started with a process, but we're ending with a very concrete change that has the end goal of improving the experience for newer residents to make it a more positive experience. And we think that if we can improve that, we can get more people to move to our area, which is what this is, what this is all about. So, but I wanted to ask Rochelle and Sully, if you guys would tell us just a little bit about your experience. You have a microphone for them?
We can try this one again.
And so Shelley and Sully, they moved here from California last April, was it? And they came and they chatted with us, and I thought it was just fascinating. So I wanted to invite them here. And so I want you to share your experience, the good, bad, and the ugly. And the ugly is fine if you have it. Yeah, could you, well, anyway, go ahead. I might ask you questions, but just go ahead and I'll just probe if I.
Thank you, everybody, for welcoming us here. Thank you, John, and everybody from Extension for inviting us here. As John mentioned, we met just a few weeks ago when I attended this meeting, but in the Iron Range, with way less people.
Just so you know, Ely is part of the Iron Range.
Okay.
I think so. Is that right? You don't identify? You don't identify? Okay.
I default, I'm a newcomer, I have no.
Yeah. That might be a different topic for, okay.
We are learning a lot of things. One of the first things we learned was the correct way to pronounce PhD. So we didn't out ourselves right away. So thank you again. My name is Rochelle, my husband Sully, and we moved from California this past April, so it looks a lot like this when we got here. I'm originally from Wisconsin. From central Wisconsin, which I feel like is not like anymore. Sully is from Southern California. I'll let him tell you about that. And I lived in California for almost 10 years before we decided to come back out here. So we wanted to come back out to the Midwest for a lot of reasons. And I welcome questions because there's just a lot of different reasons. My family still lives in Wisconsin, 5 hours, good distance. I'm an academic. I'm in the late stages of a doctoral program out of California. I study Hindu theology, in particular earth-based spiritualities, decolonial methodologies, and healing. My entire source, like my entire work, revolves around the healing of what I understand to be the fracture between humanity and the rest of nature that is not humanity. And I say it that way because in this world, human is part of nature, so we don't say human in nature. And we decided we wanted to come back to the Midwest, and there was a fire here. That was a little surprising because we had just, finished scraping all the ash off our cars in California. It was a little scary for us. We live in Mackinac. Does anyone know where Mackinac is?
Yeah.
Sweet. Because we would do it, we put it in like the Google map and it would be like an intersection. Yeah. In the middle of nowhere. So we moved there because we wanted to come to a place where we could continue to develop a relationship with the land, including the indigenous people of that land, that I could do the work that I'm doing. We came here to start doing some homesteading. So we're learning a great deal about farming and what's not possible. But we're also finding some really interesting, ways to kind of hack it. We're hacking it. we found our home in Mackinac because we thought, hey, first, how about Superior? And then we were like, actually, the tax laws in Minnesota are better. So we hopped the border, and then we're like, Duluth is just too much city. It's very small, but just still too much city. Coming from the Bay Area, Northern California. And we love Duluth, though. No hate on Duluth. Love Duluth. We wanted to find a place. We actually use the dark sky map. We do some astrophotography, and we wanted to be in a place where we were as close to the wild space as we could be. And so we actually live right next to Whiteface Reservoir. And we have like 10 acres now of forest that we're trying our best to keep wild, to rehabilitate, to understand the invasive species on it, and things like that. And speaking of remote work, we're both pretty much entirely remote right now. My doctoral program is still in California, as is my advisor and everybody else. I teach remotely, I tutor remotely. Sully will tell you in a second that he works remotely for UC Berkeley. But we both came here with the intention of letting those remote connections eventually go. Someday I will graduate. If there's anyone else in this room that's done a PhD, I think you feel me. But we came here with the intention of becoming as much a part of this community as we could and just becoming a beneficial part of it. And for us, that included being ourselves and coming here as we are. There have been a lot of really wonderful moments since we've moved here, including that on Halloween, we got a really cool snow shower and I was dancing out in my yard like a moron, like super happy about the snow because I had forgotten, that change of seasons, how valuable it is, how magical it is. And our neighbor happened to be on his hunting land next to us. Came over to make sure we were okay. And we've been welcomed in some great ways. In Virginia, I've recently joined the board of the Lyric Community Center for the Arts, because the arts as well, aesthetics overall are a really big, important part of my work. And we're looking at, maybe in a few years we can start a business. Maybe we can have an Indian restaurant. I don't know. So far, when we say that to people, they're like, yeah, like, okay, it won't be too hot, I promise.
We'll be there.
Just tell us a little bit about how you discovered Mackinac or the area in general, and part of your motivation maybe for coming to the Midwest in the first place.
So we wanted to leave California in part to escape the fires, to escape the crowding, being in natural spaces, especially wild spaces, the redwoods, the coast. California is an amazing place. It's an amazing place. But those spaces are so heavily commodified. And the people to whom those spaces belong are fighting very, very hard for basic recognition. And we couldn't find a space where we could be immersed in wild nature and feel safe. Or at least feel safe from buses of tourists from around the world, who occasionally even photographed us. We wanted to come back to the Midwest because I'm from here, because I convinced him, the city boy from California, that living in small town, I grew up in a town with about 400 people in it, and I wanted that back. I did the thing where, you go off and you go to the cities and you travel around the world, and I was like, I want to go home. I want to go home to where people remember to say please and thank you, and where people are just closer to the earth. And like I said, we were thinking about Wisconsin, and then we thought, no, we definitely want to head toward Minnesota instead. And we looked at the dark sky map, we looked at, county lines. We found our home in Mackinac because, this was era of COVID, by the way. We bought this place online, like it was buying a sweater from Old Navy. And we didn't just throw a dart at the map. But we wanted to be in a place where we would be at least 30 minutes from a city, and we are. We wanted to be someplace where a bear might come into our yard, and it had. Great day. And we wanted to be close enough to Duluth to where we could kind of drive and take advantage. Like we went to
I never went to Pride in San Francisco, for example. Way too overwhelming for me. Pride in Duluth, perfect. Perfect speed, perfect size of people. It was great. We had a wonderful time. It was a home that we could afford that met our needs in terms of being immersed in wild space. So there's forests all around us. Like I said, the reservoir is right there. We have an abundance of wildlife around us, including a pack of wolves around the Whiteface Reservoir that, you know, we're extremely happy to be here. I know everybody's like, the snow, but the snow, we're getting sleds.
Yeah.
This is gonna be great. Nothing is going to stop us. I will make all the chili. So,
I wanted to, you had shared with us in Evelyn that you found this, or you sort of, the traction for Mackinnon was an online Facebook.
yeah,
Oh, that's right.
Is that
Yeah.
right? So I'm thinking, like, they didn't have a prior connection to this place, so the online, like, that online piece is important. And so if you're trying to market yourself or to do resident recruitment, the online pieces are important as well. That was one of the things I wanted to cover. I don't want to rush you either, but
No, it's all right.
I'm already over my time.
I do want to say the Whiteface group was very important for us. We do not know anybody. We still know very few people. Part of that we understand is due to COVID. The Whiteface Facebook group was the place where we actually could find people in the same area, and they are the people that we were like, hey, what do we do if this happens? Can anybody come over and show us what an auger is for? Things like that. That one Facebook group basically was the thing that made it. It made it possible for us to know that we wouldn't be completely alone in trying to figure out how to deal with snow, because I'm from Wisconsin, I know snow, but I don't know snow. And he knows snow none at all. And I would like to give Sully a chance to say hi.
Do we still have enough?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, if people need to, you know, quietly do your thing, but I'd love to hear from you.
Right. Hi, my name is Sully. I grew up 2 hours east of Los Angeles, and I lived in California for about 33 years before we moved here. I have traveled quite a bit, though. I've been around the country quite a bit, including the Midwest and other parts of the world, through work and just recreation as well. So I currently work for, I'm one of those people that John mentioned, that I work full-time remotely, 100% for the University of California, Berkeley, doing financial analysis and dabbling in the dismal science of economics. My background is also in economics. But the shift from California to here has been kind of my own personal study as well, like understanding my own viewpoints and how I've developed them in a culture that is very extremely diverse racially, you know, in all ways the word diversity encompasses. To come into a community that is older, essentially, not in terms of age, but like in terms of history, there's more of a preserved kind of historical heritage here that is very different than California, which is almost always just, you know, chasing the next thing, the next fad that's blowing up. Hollywood, you know, determines everything in Southern California, and then the tech sector up in north is basically the leader over there. But coming into this community area has, you know, it's been, of course, you know, the feeling of being, you know, the one person that kind of sticks out in the room has been a bit of a challenge at first, kind of a shock, cultural shock for me. But as I've, you know, tried to get more involved through that Lyric Community Center, and mostly Shelley has been doing a lot more community outreach efforts. I've been kind of stuck in my cave doing remote work, but this is my attempt, hopefully, to, you know, branch out a little bit more. As we've been trying to get more involved into the community, it's been an interesting and just understanding the different viewpoints and how people have, you know, developed here in terms of their view on life in general, which is so starkly different than so many people I've known in California. And there's, you know, there's a lot of positives that this region brings to my viewpoint as well in the world. that is definitely cherished, and I'm learning a lot just by, being here as well, engaging with the community. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling, so.
Oh, that's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to point out how this works with this journey mapping process. It's going in and asking very direct, specific, pointed questions about their experience with, the overall experience with, first of all, just thinking about moving to a new location, then, making a decision. Can you picture what it would be if you actually did here? Could you see your life, living in Ely or in Mackinac? But then once they show up, we want to find out what was that, how did that work, and how were you treated? Where did you feel comfortable, and maybe where did you not? And we can have then we can have an opportunity to have conversations once we start to identify these themes. And so anyway, that's why we're doing this work. I had one other program that we are working on called Making It Home, and I'm not going to talk about it because we're way over time, and I apologize for that. I was planning on getting through this much sooner, but anyway, I wanted to thank you for inviting me up here to talk with you a little bit today about some of the things that we're working on in Extension. And we want to partner with communities around Minnesota. So anyway, anything, we're happy to come back whenever you'd like, and any projects or ideas that you guys might have, we're all ears, and we want to be partners with you moving forward here. So yes, questions?
Yeah, a question that I would have is, what about the boom bust enterprises and so forth? Would that be economic development, if you get a boom bust thing here, which?
Yep, we live in a boom bust economy, and it's the northeast part of the state has a different economy than the rest of the state, and so we're always going to have that. And so a lot of the economic development work that we used to do and used to be prominent was trying to figure out how to keep those booms last longer, and sometimes, oftentimes that involves trying to help out the larger industries remain competitive or whatever that is. So it is economic development, and that sort of goes into that old industrial recruitment or that old school smokestack chasing bit that I mentioned earlier. Yes.
Is there a way to tie why people would move into a community versus moving out of the community they're leaving?
Yeah, that's interesting. I did an interesting, I thought it was interesting because I did it about 10 years ago. In 2010, I did on the Iron Range. I did an intercept study with a group of UMD students that I was working with. It was called Iron Range: Who's Coming and Who's Going? And we interviewed people and asked them questions like, what are the factors that might make you stay on the range or to stay at home, and what are the factors that might push you away? And some of the results were a bit more surprising, and others were less surprising. But yeah, people are coming and going, and what we're sort of kind of preaching now is it's okay to leave once you graduate high school and get experience someplace else and go to college and get some other, not just relevant work experience, but maybe in a community where there's a culture where you haven't experienced before. So yeah, that does happen.